Welcome back. We are discussing the issue of food security, and joining me now to discuss this issue is noted economist and currently the Director General of FICCI, Mr. Rajiv Kumar. Thank you, Rajiv, for joining us today to discuss this very crucial issue. We are in the midst of a debate about the proposed National Food Security Bill. It could possibly become the right to food law very soon. Do you think this government has the capacity and the wherewithal to actually implement such a huge scheme?
Siddharth, let me start by saying that food security it should be like a birthright and should be the entitlement for every Indian, especially 60 years after our independence. But it's not a matter of just passing a law. I mean, food security has to be achieved. Food security has to be, achieved is the only word, by hard work and by doing sort of the reforms and the progress in agriculture. Because ultimately, it's not a matter, in my view, of passing a law or of defining a subsidy.
Or providing a budgetary allocation.
Or providing a budgetary allocation, because it is a matter of having enough food available in the country, either by growing it yourself or by imports, so that the prices of the food remain such that it is accessible to the poorest of the poor.
Do you think there is enough fiscal space, and I'm not talking about the political decision or the administrative capability, is there enough fiscal space for the finance minister to go ahead and announce this in the forthcoming budget?
Well, in my honest opinion, no. See, because the food subsidy bill as it is at the moment, I think has already become about 1.4% of GDP. You know, you're looking at numbers, if you want to increase this further and include all the provisions. Now, you know, there are various estimates. Some people say only 17,000 crores is needed for this year. Some others would say 40,000 and so on. I think we have to go beyond this to say that if you enshrine this law into law, then how will these numbers and how will this provisioning increase over the years? And whether
what will be the annual sort of indexation that you...
What would be the, you know, what is the kind of a structural public expenditure, requirement that you are introducing now in the budget, which will make sure that this much of your expenditure now is slated for this, thing. So the fiscal space, especially at this time, given that you've got all the other, requirements for your infrastructure, for your education, for your health, you don't want to remove the subsidies from diesel, you don't want to, do away with other subsidies that
you can't touch kerosene.
You can't touch kerosene, as you've noticed. So I don't think, there is the fiscal space. Now, luckily for us, the last year or two have seen a huge growth in our revenues, which is, and especially this year, you've done this investment. You had 42% growth in indirect taxation. I'm not sure, and this is a result of a widening of the indirect tax base, which has come about as an introduction of the VAT, I think. Because more and more of your economy has come into the indirect tax net.
Yes.
Now, that's a once and for all change.
So, Rajiv, would it be okay to suggest from what you are saying that possibly the implementation of this law should be looked post the introduction of the GST regime?
I think so. I think very much that once you've got that, and once you've actually unified the tax regime, once you know what's your buoyancy, that you are expecting in the tax regime, I think it will be far more fiscally prudent to introduce such a large, such a sort of large take on the public fisc. After that, after your tax regime has stabilized and is not so you don't expect another break, in the near future.
Won't this proposed bill therefore put a huge burden on the sort of production side, and that in turn lead to a huge inflationary spiral which no government will be able to handle?
I am not sure whether the bill or the law itself will put a burden on it, because these people who are there, fortunately in our country, are not starving to death. So there is no such thing like, there is food available to these people also. Now it is available to them at a higher price, and what the bill is trying to say, that it will make it available at a lower price. In effect, raising their level of living, because if you get your requirement met at a lower price, your real income rises.
Absolutely.
My take on this is therefore that it will not. What will be better required is perhaps, let's say, if you quantify the subsidy that you are giving, just like Brazil, why don't you just transfer that cash to these guys?
But is the administrative structure available to do a direct cash transfer? Two
If-
successive economic surveys have made this
If
point.
it is not available for that, it cannot be available for undertaking and implementing as complicated a program of delivery of food grains at subsidized rates to the poor people who are the targeted beneficiaries. And I'm saying this because we have subsidies in kerosene, and today that subsidy regime is
And we
actually
saw this shocking murder
it's
just
act- it's-
precisely
it's
because of
actually
that.
tainted with blood.
Yes.
See, because what is this murder for? It is because a subsidized kerosene is now being used for adulteration and not for the purpose it is intended to be. The same thing, you have the danger with a very weak governance system in place. The same danger faces this particular bill, that all the subsidized cereal that you would give would actually find its way to the market,
Yes.
will not reach the targeted beneficiaries, and then you will get a whole mafia and a whole sort of rent generating corruption activity built around it, which will not help you to achieve the purpose that you are doing, which is very noble.
Right.
But so is the Anti-Dowry Act, which is very noble.
And higher procurement for meeting the needs of this scheme would also lead to a huge increase in open market prices.
Absolutely. And so which is what would happen is that the poor who will not have access to this will ultimately have to go to the market and have to buy the food at a higher price.
Because
Then
this precise scheme has pushed
the
up.
precise scheme has pushed up the price. So the higher the procurement, we know for a fact that the higher the procurement by the public authorities, the higher is the market price. So rather than, same thing happens with kerosene. These guys don't get the kerosene from their ration card, so they ultimately go to the open market and buy it at higher prices than what they should be doing. So my take is this: why would you want to introduce a scheme which you don't have the governance capacity to implement? And two, would you not be better off making all that, paying all that attention and all that sort of resources into raising what you said, agricultural productivity? Because, the Prime Minister, when he came into power in 2004, talked about the second green revolution and the urgency of it. We haven't
Yet
seen
we
that
haven't
happening.
seen anything about it.
Nothing has happened. No improvement.
And in fact, in some of the sectors which actually benefited from the green revolution, we are now seeing significant stagnation.
Now seeing significant stagnation. And as income has risen, the demand for food, with not just cereal, but food in general, vegetables, fruits, proteins, has increased, as it will. So you need a revolution in agricultural sector, because this sector is so backward that it supports 55% of our population and contributes 14.5% to our GDP. Now that is where you need to put your attention on and not get distracted by these, sorry to use the word, but there is no other, populist schemes which will promise to the poor but will never be able to deliver the promise, because neither would you have the food available internally, nor would you have the balance of payment space, given the rising current account deficits, to import the necessary food. And also, in any case, when India imports, the world prices rise.
As we have seen in pulses, for instance.
As we have seen in pulses and in other situations. So why go down a route which will only mean,
which spells disaster,
in a sense, more misery for the poor, rather than giving them the higher nutrition that you want. And just one last word on it is that, the key has been for several economic surveys, the malnutrition levels in children and in mothers, young mothers. That's a scheme which is already in place and nothing is being done about it.
True.
And those levels are below the sub-Saharan.
Money remains unspent, actually, which is a great tragedy.
So why not make that attention, put your attention, your administrative attention on that, make that accountable, so that we don't have the sort of, the blemish, the stigma of our malnutrition, child nutrition levels being below the sub-Saharan African countries. Now, I would have much rather that the NAC paid its attention to that and helped us improve
rather
that,
than come up
with this, in my view, completely unimplementable scheme, because it will be almost amounting to a nationalization of the wholesale trade in cereals, in wheat and rice, given the amounts involved.
Much of the government actually shares this view. But given this backdrop and given all that you are saying, what really can a finance minister do in his annual balance sheet exercise to address all these issues that arise?
No, what the finance minister can do is, one, not be tempted to go down this route. Follow
And he's one of our tallest politicians.
He's
So
one of our
if he can't resist the pressure, then I don't think anyone else can.
But I really do plead with him, not to be going down this route, because because also at this time, given that the inflation is so sticky, fiscal policy has to play a role along with the monetary policy to squeeze the inflation out.
So your final message to the finance minister when it comes to the overall issue of food security for the forthcoming budget?
Devote a lot more resources in improving agricultural productivity. Do the structural reforms that will modernize your agriculture and retail sector, and not take over, not undertake or not commit to certain policies which will neither give you fiscal joy nor the productive joy that you're looking for.
All right, Rajiv Kumar, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us this message for the finance minister. That was Rajiv Kumar talking about what perhaps needs to be done in the forthcoming budget with regard to food security. Clearly, we hope that the finance minister will pick up some of these suggestions and go ahead and implement that. With that, it's a wrap on this issue of the development agenda for Budget 2011. We'll be back next week. Thank you for watching.